back up here. I'm always in the back there. I was thinking earlier, it's a challenge back there trying to get all the slides right. And we need a little sign back there that's, how they have the zoos, do not feed the animals? We need to have like a little sign that says, do not talk to the technician, because that's when we inevitably say hi to somebody and then the slide be like, oh my goodness. But I wanted to come here today. Most of you know me, but I have been involved in the field of education for, the past 20 years. I won't go through my whole life story there, but I've come to really believe and work on how we can change education for the better for the world. And I'm not going to focus on that so much today, but I've realized so much of what I see that needs to happen in education has a lot to do with my education from Unity, specifically mostly Unity of Auburn. And I realize that this is something that's kind of interesting, but I think today I may be, we're probably pretty close. You might be younger than me, I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe not. Either case, I am, probably one of the younger folks here today, and yet I'm also, other than my dad and maybe somebody else, probably the oldest person being in Unity of Auburn. I started at Unity of Auburn when I was, knee-high to a grasshopper, something like that. I was about 3 years old, and we were starting to meet over at the State Theater. That's where Unity of Auburn first became a church. Anybody here you can raise your hand, Dad. Anybody went to there we go, State Theater, other State Theater folks? 3 of us? 4 of us? Okay. Oh, right, Dave, you were way back then too, yeah. So we've been on this journey together for a while. So started the State Theater. We had our minister at the time of Billy Blaine. I think I have a slide for that. There we go. And so what I'm going to kind of go through is each of the ministers we've had over time. I realize this is each person brought something to my understanding more. And I called up my mom and dad today and said, hey, what do these different ministers represent to you? And, what do you remember? And it's really interesting because my memory and my thoughts on what I've learned are so different, because when Billy was there at the State Theater, I was just so small. So my memories of what she represents is, of course, totally different than my folks who were, closer to my age at the time. And so I think what I found from Billy was, and what's really important that we bring to the world, is the first concepts, and this is throughout Unity, so any of the things I'm saying are not just one person, but how important it is we actually practice what we preach. The whole history of Unity, of being the school of practical Christianity, of bringing practical tools to our lives. And Billy did a lot of that. I didn't realize it because I was so small, but my dad told me this morning that she actually was able to bring over a whole bunch of interesting speakers to see all these different points of view, which we'll also talk about soon. One of them was the sister of Jimmy Carter, and other really, really interesting folks who were here. The thing that I remember most about Billy, though, is probably the one that my mom and dad didn't think about as much, was she was into tough love. She was into practicing what you preach. And she was into sometimes you just have to put your foot down and say, I support you as a human, but I'm not going to support your behavior. And I think that's also important. I think we need to continue to be able to bring that into schools, is to be able to have the ability to say, a teacher to say, I am always going to care for you, but I'm not going to accept certain behaviors from you because I see a higher good in you. And I really feel that's something that I got from Billy's tenure here. She also really put this into practice. She was really big on tithing. We're going to kind of see full circle. One, I don't think she was tithing while she was here, but we all know, of course, Reverend Cherie. Reverend Cherie was able to go through ministerial school partly because of the tithing from Billy Blaine. So there's a whole circle we're going to kind of end up back around here. So after Billy was here, and I had gone with my parents briefly, we actually traveled to Unity Village area. My dad was becoming a licensed Unity teacher. There were changes in the church, and I'm not going to go through all of the dramas that have happened every time change happens. But we did briefly have another minister here as an interim minister, if you could put up that next slide there, of Len Kovar. Anybody remember Len? Yep. Yeah, okay, good. So Len was our minister actually twice. 2 times we had transition. But the first time, between Billy and Catherine, he was here for probably about 6 months. And he passed away this last year or so. I forget if it was just 1 year ago. But what I really found from Len, and I think that, again, schools, education needs to have more of this, is the focus of peace on earth. Now, I'm not saying that I'm a complete person, just say, hey, we don't need to defend ourselves. You know, I believe in self-defense, but I believe that's a part of unity that is so important. Of every time we leave the service of saying, hey, how can I take each moment and live each moment to live in peace eternally? How can I do this? And yeah, schools kind of do that, but I think that's a more important part to our curriculum that we can have, both from inner peace, for children to be able to be peaceful with each other, which is hard, right? I mean, work with kids, you know, all of them fight. We all fight sometimes. So how do we have better personal peace? And how do we bring this to the world more? I say this about Len, and you see his uniform on. Len actually was, I believe, World War II, right? And he was a POW, and he had a march of all these POWs. And I don't think everybody made it in the march that he had, where he was being sent with the Germans, the Nazis. And afterwards, even with all of this pain he had from being in the war, he came back to become a minister and be able to talk about peace of mind, and peace amongst us. And so that's where I think I got more of that. Again, all these things, every single person I'm going to show here represents this to all of us, because unity is all of these things, plus more. There's something I'm not even going to cover today, like prosperity, which unity is so much of. So I only can hint on certain parts, and the parts I think are most important for us to bring into just the general awareness of education. Okay, can I get the next one? So, Catherine Brenson, I think at the time Corbin, is that her last name at the time? She was our minister for a while, and I was not as much involved. I was young, I didn't know her that well, but one thing she brought here, and why I put her for denials and affirmations, is whenever we sing the peace song here, you know, most churches, if you go to another Unity church, I'm sure many of you have been to one, the words are, let there be peace on earth, right? But she came here and she said, you know what? We are about affirming. If we just say, let there be peace on earth, we're not affirming. And plus, as we've seen, if you look at the literature, even though we hear about war all the time on TV, and we know there's terrible wars going on, there's a war in Ukraine, there's a war in Sudan. I mean, there's all these places where there is death and dying happening. But the world is much more peaceful than it has ever been in the past. Now, we also have the ability to destroy ourselves with nuclear bombs and things like that, so keeping my fingers crossed. Not just that, keeping affirming, right? Thank you for peace on earth. We sing thank you for peace on earth, and that is all because of Catherine. She brought that here. And from all that time, we have kept that affirmation at the end of every Sunday, that we are thankful of having peace on earth, that we are continuing to affirm that we have peace on earth. And that gratitude is also something really important to me about unity. We focus on our gratitude. That's part of our affirming. Our affirming in unity is that we are thankful. And we realize so much more that we have. And there's so much now, you know, scientific research that shows that gratitude helps us out. And so being able to have these affirmations in school and truly see that they're true. Because affirmations don't just work. I mean, the scientific study shows that affirmations, you can just say, oh yeah, I believe this. I'm a great person. But you have to believe it. And sometimes that takes evidence. Sometimes that takes people just caring. There's a whole bunch of things. But the more you believe it, then the more power affirmations continue to have in our life. And so, again, another thing. These are things that every child growing up, I mean, I was so fortunate. I got this. Your kids got this, right? I mean, we need more kids coming through Unity because this is not happening in our education, right? This is still not happening in our schools. I'm trying to put it more there, but we need this. Kids need this. So continuing on with the history of Unity, after we had Reverend Catherine, the one person I could not find a photo of, which I thought was so strange because she's been a professor at Sierra College for many years, and I looked on the internet, looked on Sierra College, I looked at every place, and I couldn't find one of Elaine. But Elaine was also an interim minister. In fact, it was kind of a rough time because she wasn't an official Unity minister. And many people in the congregation at the time wanted her to stay our minister. But she wasn't an official Unity minister. If we brought her in as a minister, we would no longer be a Unity church. And there was a whole bunch of things. That's happened between almost every time there's a change. It brings up a lot of things in a lot of people, and it brings up, like, where am I? What's my identity? Things of that sort. But one of the things I remember about Elaine, while she was our interim minister, and actually I remember this when I went to a service of hers when she had her own church, was about really, even though many ministers that are about being open-minded and skeptical. And in fact, just recently, thinking about Reverend Cherie, somebody after service came to her and said, I don't agree with you on this such and such. And she said, that's great because we don't ask you to leave your brain at the door, right? And that is so true. But I think I started to get that more with Elaine, because one of the things, she had a Christmas service, and she just kind of came out right and said, you know what? I don't believe, Mary was a virgin. It was the first time it hit me. Whoa, maybe she wasn't. And so it was something where, we can think, we can have these other ideas. We keep our minds open to the possibilities. We can be skeptical and open and bring what fits for us. And that's the beautiful thing about Unity. I mean, I know every one of us here is going to have differing beliefs. I mean, within my own family, me and my mom, we share so much together about this history of Unity, and yet on some things, we're totally different. For my mom, Jesus is a very important friend for her, as it is for a lot of people, a closeness. For me, I don't feel that as much, but we all can be here. We all can be here and gain value. And in today's world, and the other thing, I don't want to get political, but we have so many different people of different political stripes of seeing this divided world, and yet, you know what? We are still in unity here. We can still respect each other. That's something valuable. That needs to be in school. I don't think we need to bring all the politics in, but just to be able to listen to each other and say, I still behold the Christ, and we can't say that in a public school, but just to be able to say that here. Isn't that amazing? That we can be of all these different philosophies and still be together and respect each other and find common good. So, we have so much going on here. I'm getting teary thinking about this, about what I've received. So, let's get past the picture of Elaine with no picture. Slide of Elaine with no picture. So, anybody remember Ron? This is a little bit more recent. Yeah, okay. A lot of folks. Okay. So Ron, when he was here, I was just starting YOU. That's the Youth of Unity. I was a teenager. Tertia Hawkins was our sponsor. And I really never saw Ron that much because I was always in YOU. But I remember the first time he spoke, I came up and gave him a big hug. And he always has told me, even recently, I connected with him on LinkedIn, and he says, you were the guy who came up and gave me this big hug the first time. You were the kid who gave me the big hug. And so I always think of that time period while I'm going through YOU and with Ron, about unconditional love. This is something that we have here, but if any of you ever have a chance to get involved with YOU, the Youth of Unity, to go to a rally, they're not as big as they used to be. I mean, we're rebuilding, but when you go there, there is this just suddenly unconditional love, which is so important because, especially as a teenager, I mean, didn't know who I was. I was, bullied as pretty much everybody was. I'm sure I was a bully sometimes. I actually, in fact, know I was. So there's all this stuff going on, and just being able to enter this place where it's just like unconditional love, and everybody's going to accept you. It just is an amazing feeling. I can't even describe it because it's just something that, of course, exactly. That's why we're still here no matter what, because we know this is so valuable for kids. You got to get involved and do this someday just to experience it. It is just, I can't describe it. It's like going to a meditation retreat. You can say, oh yeah, it's great, but you don't know it until you've done it. So that's, for me, is what Ron, the whole agape also, understanding agape, this human love, just unconditional for each other. And so Ron was here for a while. Then things changed there, and we're going to come up to our next group, the Mannings. Yeah. They really helped bring us forward and stabilize. Now, I put for them up here, co-creating a world for all to thrive. Now, what's really interesting is that is not, our Thrive in a Changing World is actually based upon the Unity Worldwide Ministries, one of their vision statements. They changed it, but it's still part of their value statements. And that actually came about more when the Schindlers were here. And the whole thriving in an ever-changing world, that was from the Schindlers too. But when I talked with both my mom and dad this morning on this, and I said, hey, thriving in a changing world and co-creating a world works for all, who represents that to you? Both of them said, the Mannings. And I really feel, because the Mannings, you may not know this, but they were back in Unity Village first before they came here. They were very, very formative. We've had a songbook for many years, The Wings of Song. A lot of that was done through Janet Manning. The song we still sing, I Am Free and I Am Unlimited, that's from Janet. Just amazing people. And they were part of the foundation of Unity, of the change in Unity at Unity Village, and then coming here to bring this change towards how we co-create a world that works for all. And I really feel that when the Schindlers came later, they really built on top of that. And so even though those specific words really more come from the time of the Schindlers, I have put this with the Mannings here because that is something that they brought. They also brought us to this building. That was not an easy thing. And we can see here some of the things from the past. That window was all the way over from where after we had left the State Theater, and we went over to the Maidu Center, which used to be a hardware store. We had gotten that window. And then we had a raffle over there. I think this was probably during the time of Catherine, I would guess. And we had some wonderful congregants named Mert and Cecil. Mert did our wonderful quilt that matches our wonderful window. In fact, she spent like a whole year making it. We had a huge raffle, made a lot of money for the church, and as soon as the person, and I forget even who won it, if it's one of you, let me know. But the person who won that immediately donated it back to the church so we could put it back up. So that actually had 2 gifts coming from it. The funniest thing about Mert and Cecil is my family and I had just moved back from Unity Village to California. We lived in Auburn Greens for a bit, and my dad comes to my mom and says, hey, guess who our neighbors is? And basically it was Mert and Cecil, which they had never met before. They go to Unity also. And small world, right? I mean, all interconnection of this divine order, which I don't even have in here as one of the other principles, but that it is going to work out okay. So, but Wayne and Janet, they brought all this back over here. We still have Manning Hall. They really stabilized and brought our church forward. This whole area here, They designed this. Our sound system, it's old now, but when they first made this, this was state of the art. And Wayne was into a theater. This whole thing, the way we have the stage and all the lighting. I mean, you don't have this in most churches, right? We really have a theater here. We haven't taken full opportunity of it, but that's what this is. This is a full theater to be able to do whatever we need. And that's a lot from them. Both great musicians. Janet passed away several years ago. Wayne's still around. And just great people. So after the Mannings, they retired. That was probably our last three transitions have been the smoothest because everybody retired from that point. And so we had the Schindlers here. And most of us were here with the Schindlers. I really came back during the Schindlers' time. I had been part of with the Mannings, but I had moved down to Sacramento. But I was actually a YOU sponsor during the time of the Mannings, but I'd left for a bit because it was far away and it was finding my own place. And one day I come back to church. The Mannings are now, not the Mannings, the Schindlers are the new ministers. And Karen just stops me and says, "Hey, would you be willing to help us out with PowerPoint?" I said, "Sure." And 10 years later, I was still doing it every week. But for me, the Schindlers really just brought so much. Almost anything here I'm talking about, I was like, well, which one should I talk with the Schindlers about? Because they have so much of this critical thinking and all of these different things. But the one thing that I got new for me was how meditation can be different, how we can use mindfulness meditation. And when I grew up in Unity, there's a lot of great meditations we have, and a lot of them are visualizations, and a lot of them are just kind of being able to see the world in a different way or feel a different way. But Mark, he also brought mindfulness meditation here because of his Buddhist background. And in fact, today, I wasn't originally going to do the meditation, but I am now because hopefully divine order. I don't know if Natalie's going to feel that way at the moment. Her car broke down, which is not so great, but she can't make it today. So I'm going to do the meditation today, and we will envision her with total divine order for her car to be able to have the perfect way the car can heal, probably involving a mechanic, but we will still envision that. But with the way this is, Mark brought that type of just refocus. And this is something that's actually getting into education now. Just being able to be mindful and refocusing, like say on the breath, of being able to just focus on the breath and get back to that. And we're going to do that practice today because we haven't done that for a while here. I'm going to do that meditation. It's a simple one, but it's really powerful because if you do that meditation, as you get better at it, you can then refocus on that when everything else is crazy around you and you feel like you're in the middle of everything. You can come back to the breath or whatever other focus you have. And with that focus, you can be able to recenter yourself. And it's been shown that this can help alleviate pain. It can help with so many different things. And in this world that's crazy all around us, sometimes we just need to be able to refocus ourselves. And so that's why I have this for the Schindlers, even though I practically could have had anything here. And they're the ones who I was here the most through, since I was here every Sunday, doing PowerPoint. And I want to get to today, and then we'll move forward to the meditation. Cherie, Reverend Cherie, such an amazing woman, amazing person. And again, this is kind of a circle, and I was talking about things, and when I first said earlier about affirmations, like, oh, that should be Cherie. I'm like, yeah, but you know what? Because of thank you for peace on earth, I wanted to kind of attune that to Karen, but Cherie really brings in our mindset, right? It's like every Sunday, we got to keep our positive mindset here, thinking about this. And that is something where it's always been part of Unity, but I find that so much more every time I am here for a service, that is something that I am relearning each time and getting deeper with. So, wow. How many of you knew that we had this many ministers, other than those who've been through all of it? You were in the office. That's how you knew. But yeah, we've had a lot. It's a long history. And my mom actually wrote a whole history once about Unity of Auburn. And so it's a pretty extensive thing. And then we're here now. And I did not even include the study group because I wasn't here for the study group. And apparently that started in the 1940s. So more of the history of Unity of Auburn was previous to us ever being a church. There was a study group all the way from the time of the film wars, basically. So yeah, I know it's a little meandering here, but there's so much we have. And I guess if I can leave us on anything before we get into the meditation, is we are working on building our youth group here. Riley is here. We're hoping he can come here more often, especially if we can be able to get some more kids. Since we don't yet have this in our education system, think of kids that you know. Think of people you know who could benefit, because this is something you just don't get out there. Now, thankfully, there's a lot more. You know, the funny part about Unity, and I think one of the harder parts about getting people into Unity now, is that thankfully a lot of this, we've succeeded. A lot of this has come into new culture. If you look at a lot of things kids are saying and believing, the acceptance that's out there, and things like that. Now sometimes, I won't go into the politics of it, sometimes it's like, well, I accept you because of this, but if you don't like this, then I'm not going to accept you. And, well, we accept everybody, right? But there is still so much of this that people can gain, that kids can gain, that helps their lives. I would not be here in the Unity Church, of course, if it wasn't for Unity, but I would not have had everything that has happened to me, of all the experiences and the ability to have opportunities, I am sure, if it was not for all these different aspects of Unity that I've learned from. And as I continue in education, I will be not necessarily always putting this into, I may have to go a little bit more secular, but all of these concepts can help us no matter what our background belief is, whether we're Buddhist or Muslim or Christian. I mean, the original Unity looked at everything, looked at all of this stuff. And we are culturally Christian, and we find so much value in Christianity because all of this is expressed. But these are universal principles. These are things that we can bring any place. And so I hope that, like I said, we can bring more kids here until we can have education bring it to everybody. So thank you for your time and for being part of this movement. Okay, so with that, now that I do not have Natalie here, we can turn the lights down. And I'm going to use this one right here so that I'm not so much the center of attention. Okay, can you all still hear this? Okay, so we are going to take a little bit of time to do a mindfulness meditation today. And I'm going to take a drink of water. Okay, so I want everybody, if you're comfortable, to close your eyes. If you don't want to close your eyes, that's okay also. But if you don't, please keep your focus someplace on something. And what we're going to do is a very simple meditation. We are going to count our breaths. We're going to breathe in and breathe out to 10. And then we're going to start over. Now, the secret to this today is as we are doing this, all of us at some time are going to have other thoughts that bubble through our heads. And that's okay. The thing about mindfulness, about Buddhist meditation, is not that we don't have other thoughts. It is strengthening this mind muscle to be able to refocus. So every time you catch yourself with other thoughts, just come back to my voice, come back to your breathing. And then we will just keep going on this. So we will start from the beginning. Breathe in. 1. Breathe out. 1. Breathe in. 2. Breathe out. 2. Breathe in. 3. Breathe out. 3. Breathe in. 4. Breathe out. 4. Breathe in. 5. Breathe out. 5. Breathe in. 6. Breathe out. 6. Breathe in. 7. Breathe out. 7. Breathe in. 8. Breathe out. 8. Breathe in. 9. Breathe out. 9. Breathe in. 10. Breathe out. 10. We will start again. Breathe in. 1. Breathe out. 1. Breathe in. 2. Breathe out. 2. Breathe in. 3. Breathe out. 3. Breathe in. 4. Breathe out. 4. Breathe in. 5. Breathe out. 5. Breathe in. 6. Breathe out. 6. Breathe in. 7. And breathe out. 7. And breathe in. 8. And breathe out. 8. And breathe in. 9. And breathe out. 9. And breathe in. 10. And breathe out. 10. And we will go through one more time up to 10. And as my mind has been wandering, I bring myself back to the count. Breathe in. 1. Breathe out. 1. Breathe in. 2. Breathe out. 2. Breathe in. 3. And breathe out. 3. Breathe in. 4. Breathe out. 4. Breathe in. 5. And breathe out. 5. And breathe in. 6. And breathe out. 6. And breathe in. 7. And breathe out. 7. And breathe in. 8. And breathe out. 8. Breathe in. 9. And breathe out. 9. And finally breathe in. 10. And breathe out. 10. Now, we can keep this focus of ours, remembering we can send ourselves through our count, through our breath, anytime we need to. And when our minds go someplace else, we can always bring it back. And by practicing this practical Christianity each day, we can continue to have our ability to have a little bit more influence on our mind and our lives to bring ourselves back to peace. But for today, when we are ready, start to bring yourself back here, away from the breath, still breathing, but away from the breath, and focusing back here as our lights are coming up. We will have some special music from Dennis Kane.